Hello and welcome to Colin Bradley Artcast. I'm Stephen Bradley.
And I'm Colin Bradley.
How you doing, Dad?
I'm doing well, Steve. How are you doing yourself with your family?
Yeah, not too bad. Lost my voice. I don't know if you can tell. I've lost my voice a little bit. We've
Oh,
all.
come and join the club. Join the club.
Have you lost yours as well?
Well, no, mine's been a bit weak now. I think I'm going to have to put up with it now. Uh, it's been like that just a couple of years, 2 or 3 years now, and people would have noticed that possibly on the videos. It's to do with a bit to do with age, I suppose. But I don't mind as long as I can make myself heard and people can understand what I'm saying. That's the important thing.
That's it. Yeah. Well, my excuse is that we've all had a bit of a cough, and we have
Mm,
a toddler that is just bringing everything back. So we're all just losing our voices a little bit, but otherwise feeling very good. We're doing all right. Everyone's doing well. We're cracking on with
lovely.
things. So mustn't complain. It's all really good. Um, this week I thought we'd talk a little bit about expand on something we were touching upon last week, which was the foliage and the greenery that um, was in the squirrel that we've had some lovely feedback on last week's show, and it was a really interesting subject, and a big part of that was the foliage and the atmosphere that you created within the greenery within the squirrel. So I thought that it would be a good opportunity to go back to sort of some semi basics, but also to highlight, which we have done in many podcasts now. I mean, these podcasts have been going for 11 years now, but we've already talked about this, but let's talk about it again, because I don't think we can talk about it enough, and that is trees and foliage. And
Hmm.
in this episode I thought we'd talk about a couple of clips, so I'll be putting clips up on screen, and we'll be talking as you're working through them. These are two clips that are on our YouTube channel, so you can actually watch these if you want. But the idea is to mute the narration and just have us discuss it, and see the difference specifically between pastel pencils and watercolors, and what effects you get when drawing trees in those two different mediums. Because it's so, you've always said to me that it's such a hard thing to do. Foliage, there's a lot of things that are hard, but foliage and trees especially are difficult. And would you agree they're difficult in both mediums?
Absolutely, yes. There isn't really um, any instruction beyond what I show. People have tried it and they say, I can't do it, especially when I've done workshops and demonstrations. People are fascinated by the tree. How do you do it? And even when I show them, it's still almost impossible for them to emulate what I do. And I can't explain that away, really. But I started doing trees years and years ago. Even before I started really, I was playing around with coloured pencils at the time. And I started playing, I just developed a system. Now, I had no instruction. I copied nobody. I just looked at the picture and thought, well, this is probably how you do it. And at the cut, and the first picture I can remember was I think it was a coloured pencil I did. Now it was pretty awful. I wouldn't like to show it. I can't show it. I haven't got it. But it was the beginning of it all. And then I moved on to watercolor. From colored pencil, I moved to watercolor, and then that enhanced it even more. But again, you've got the difficulty of mixing the colors. You can't do it with a pastel pencil. It's slightly different, but with watercolor, you've got to mix those colors up. You're going to be seeing that in a minute or two when we show the watercolor, and it's really hard. I, People, I think, I have seen a few pictures of our members, and I'm quite impressed with them, to be honest. But mostly, I do think they struggle. So it's a good thing to bring into the open.
Absolutely. And as you said, teaching trees in pastel must be easier because the tones are set. You know, the colors are set. You add this color, you add that color. Is it a good progression if people want to try watercolor trees to have done some pastel pencil trees to get those fundamentals in that they can replicate with watercolor?
Yes, I say that reservedly because the pastel pencil trees are easier for the reason you outlined there. However, when you come to watercolors, a totally different ball game because you've got to mix those colors. You've got to find those colors. But there are advantages, as we're going to see in a minute, because when you mix the colors, you'll see my palette looks awful. The actual palette looks awful, but it's how I like to work, and I can then use a lot of mixed colors, mixed browns and greens and dark greens and lots of different ochres together to give me the effect that I'm looking for. Now, when you pastel pencil, it's slightly different. You've got a green, you start with a green, put a darker green on, then you put a bit of ochre on, and then you darken that, and so on. So it is much easier to do it that way. But I didn't do it that way. I did it the other way. I started with watercolor and then moved on to pastel. And
You must have thought when you got to pastel pencil, oh my God, this is easier.
well, again, it's hard for me to say that because I love doing watercolor trees. I loved it from the beginning, right from the beginning. I loved doing them. And there's something magical about it. But it does take a lot of skill. But yes, pastel pencil, they've got their advantages in both of them. But certainly, I wouldn't want to teach the watercolor that I did.
Let's show some clips now. I'm going to start off with the pastel, and this is, as I say, a clip from YouTube. So we're jumping straight in there, and people can watch this with the discussion that you have to go along with it. And this is a Scotney Castle picture, which is a class on our website, so people can watch how to do this picture. But we're jumping in sort of part way through, so you can see that some trees have been started and some trees are being sort of advanced. And obviously, as we said, you've got straightforward colors that you can just pick from in the Faber range that are greens, and you think, okay, this is how we start. So a few things I want to pick up on. Firstly, the trees on the right that you've still yet to do, those have got just very basic colors in there, but not just a green. You've got the ochres in, and you add, I just wanted to touch on that about when you add those ochres in, because people might think that you get your trees green and then you add other colors in to make them more realistic, but you have to plan those colors in advance.
Well, this is a whole program on its own here because there's so many things. Look at what I'm doing now. Now, this is something that is a bit dodgy because if you blend everything together, you end up with just a mess. But look the way I'm doing this. It's almost as though I've got another pencil in my hand. But look at me flitting about. This is a secret, and if people can pick up on this, it's going to make a big difference. You see, when you flit about, you don't stay in one place. So what I'm doing is emulating the same strokes that I was doing with the pastel pencil just now. And this is now smoothing off. And what it did, it pushed the color into the paper. Now, this is in readiness for the next stage. Now, you were talking about ochre. I would have put, I can't remember what I did now, but I'm sure I put a little bit of ochre. That would have been the 182 in, because I was a great believer and lover of the 182. So 182 would have been very lightly put in at that stage. I would repeat it a little later on because I would want to turn the green into ochre green. But you can see that difference that is making there, but it's still a long way from being finished because what we've got to find in a little, I don't know whether you're going to get to it here, but I'm going to put the dark colours on. Oh, there's
Just,
the dark colour.
just as you said it,
Yeah, how
it
about
happened.
that?
Well, these are the tree branches, and I just think it's interesting to hear the steps that you go towards.
Mm.
Would you have added those branches in before you done, like,
No,
these are
no.
sort of the interesting elements that you, um,
Mm.
interesting steps that you take, at the order of things.
Mm. But look at the difference it made, though. That's 175. You can't see it, but it's 175. Look at the difference that made. If you hadn't put those tree trunks and branches in, it wouldn't look right, would it? And
No,
there's an area that is on the right-hand side of that last tree that I put in. You can see the gaps, deliberate gaps showing through, and that's where more branches are going to go. It's preparing the way. You're building it up, and what I'm doing now is making a hole. I call it making a hole, and
yeah, yeah, you
this
are, aren't
can
you?
be this can be a disaster if you don't know what you're doing. But you'll see that this starts to work out in the end. And those
Yeah.
trees, those light tree branches, trunks that are there, melt back into the background eventually.
But you've also, that color that you're using is at 175. That's
Hmm.
dark sepia. That's not even a really dark green.
No, no. Well, you can't. Well, you can. You could use a dark green, but you've got to have something a bit stronger than that. Something a little bit more punchy. Today, I mean, that was done quite a few years ago now, when I was using just Faber-Castell. Nowadays, there are stronger greens that I would have used. I would have used 165. I don't think I used 165 at that time at all. 165 is a darker green, and I would have put that in at this stage. And then I would put the dark. I probably wouldn't have used 175. Now I would have used black.
Mm.
It
It
just
might be that
changes.
on this picture as well that you might be limiting. I can't remember whether this
Mm.
picture you chose to limit the colors somewhat to
Mm.
make the picture a little bit easier. I can't remember what level this is, this picture, but um,
Oh, it's very early on. This is one of the early ones.
I'm just
Um,
going to
but
jump ahead a little bit so you can see
now you can see
you
it.
being more forceful and more pressure, adding more pressure and a bit more contrast to the trees.
Yes, I think there's a bit of black going in now. You can see the intensity of that color. And this is where everybody will go wrong because they'll overdo that black. You see,
Mm.
people have said to me, my tree's like I've got birds' nests in them. You see, because that's what that looks like there, doesn't it? Now, to change it from that to a proper tree or a range of trees is you mix it all together. You put the darker colors, some of the darker goes and links. I might show you that in a minute. I might do, never know. I'm rattling on about something I can't remember what. Now you can see the difference. Look at the difference between that last shot and this shot. Look at those trees now on that left hand. See,
Yeah,
they look
yeah.
more real now. Do you remember I said I was darkening the trunks? Well, there you go.
Mm.
And that's
Yeah, I
now
can see.
sitting there and going back. And I don't know whether you're actually going to see it, but I do put a light green on it as well, on top of that, on top of the whole thing, giving a little bit more brilliance to it. But you can
Mm.
see how nice that hole that was in the trees earlier on, how nice it looks now. Without it, you're losing some of the interest because you've got
Mm.
a lot of trees in the background,
How
and
do
it's a
you
lot.
know when to stop?
Gosh, how many times I've been asked that question? Instinct, and I always come up with the same question. It's instinct. I know when I've done enough. There's a
There you
finished
go.
picture.
That's just the end shot there of the class. Let's bring that back to just show that. There you go on screen. That's the end shot of the
I think
video.
that's
So
one of my favourite pictures, and that is going on 20 years ago. It's got to be more than that, probably. It's a long while ago.
yeah, lovely, lovely. So sorry, carry on with what you were saying about when do you stop? Because, and I want this, I guess, applies to both because it feels like you could go on and on when it
Yeah.
comes to doing trees. You know, you
And if
could continue to tweak and change, and especially I would have thought with watercolor because you can just keep changing the tone. You could
you,
keep tweaking it, and that must be very tempting.
it is, and I've seen it done many, many times, and think, "Oh, I've ruined it! I've ruined it." So, how do you stop ruining something? Well, you just have to keep going at it and learning all the time. Every time I put, in this case, a paintbrush, I learn that. I don't think you'll find many artists like me that work in the way that I'm working here. I tend to be more like the Victorian artists. They would do something like I'm doing, but
Mm,
modern artists today tend to make them wishy-washy, I call it. But look at
yeah,
that palette now. What a mess. You wouldn't think that I could produce something like that with a palette like that, would you?
yeah, yeah. I was just gonna say you're also working quite quickly
Hmm.
um, with this. You know, when you actually have the brush on the paper, you're quite frantic with your brushstrokes. Is that deliberate? Do you have to be that swift with your technique of the brushstroke there?
Um, I don't know quite how to answer that. It comes with experience, Steve. It comes with. See, I don't look at that and thinking, oh, I've got to do a little bit here and I've got to do a little bit there and I've got to make that darker. I just do it. It's
Yeah,
instinct. You know, now I'm picking, look, I'm mixing up a bit of brown now. Where's that going to go, would you think? Where am I going to put that brown? It's that sort of ochre brown.
yeah. So many different tones. It looks like it's
There you are. You see, I'm just
and
putting a
it's
little bit
hard.
in there now. You
Could
wouldn't,
you could could you kind of just pick any of those tones on the palette? Could you kind of pick any of those and just put them in? Does it really matter um, at this point? You know, because on the pastel pencil you've started light green, dark green. Are you
hmm.
specifically going in with? Could you pick a light green and then still add that in, or would you be primarily now focusing on darker colors?
No, I'm going to the darker tones now. If I wanted to put lighter colors into that tree, once the darks, if you look at the dark, areas that are already there to the left of the church. If I wanted to do that, there's only one way I could do it, and that is with raw watercolor paint. I don't think I'm going to show you in this one, but you can see right at the bottom of the palette, you've got the
Yeah,
four at the top, and then well, right at the bottom, you see there's lemon yellow. Now that is a mixture of raw lemon yellow. And what I'll
yeah,
do eventually, if I want to, I can reconstitute that and it's much stronger. It's like putting oil on, really. You know, if I had oil and I want to put a bit of light back in, I can do it with that. Unlike the pastel pencil is slightly different because you can use one of the light pastel pencils and that will go over the top of the pastel that you've already put on. Watercolor doesn't work in quite the same way. So you've got to use the raw color, and again, that's unheard of. You don't see that other artists doing that, but I do it because it's the only way I can get the effects.
mm,
It's
yeah.
fascinating, though, isn't it?
You can see that almost you're putting now a dark sepia on. Like it looks like you've mixed a color that is very close to that dark sepia,
That's right.
and you're
I
putting that
wanted I
on.
wanted to just put a little bit of extra weight there. You see, a tree is you've got to balance a tree. You've got to have it sort of looking as real as you can.
Mm,
And
fantastic.
there are some branches going in, but I don't think. No, I think they're there. I'm looking. I'm looking at the branches. You can actually see the branches there now.
I'm going to
And I
skip a
would have
little
done it
bit
in the
ahead.
same way that I did the pastel.
just to see if you go into that lemon yellow. There you go. You're just bringing that lemon yellow in now.
Am I? Oh, yes, I am. You're quite right. That's raw. That's raw lemon yellow, straight out the tube, mixing it up so it's right. And what am I doing now? What you up to, Colin? Not with brush on the dark colour there. I don't think that's meant to be there. I don't know. It's a long time ago I did this, so I can't remember it now.
See what you do there. Yeah, I mean, look at that. That is bright.
There you go. See?
Yeah, fantastic. You can tell though, you can tell by looking at comparing the two trees. I mean, I know they're different levels and different techniques and different skill levels that are required to do these, but you can see with watercolor just how much more real these trees look, because you can vary those tones so much more. You know, you can absolutely tell these trees are another level of detail.
There's a lot of fun too. I mean, the one of the latest watercolors I did was the Castle Combe. Oh, look how that's a really good picture, isn't it?
This is your Aylesford.
Like it's finished.
Yeah. We've come to the end of that clip too. I skipped ahead a little bit, but yeah, you can see the section that you were working on there, and I mean, there's so many different foliage in this particular class as well, but you can definitely tell the depth of which these trees have to them compared to the pastel ones, you know. And it feels like it's harder, but it's easier because you have such a vast array of tones available to you compared to pastel, where you'd be looking through the pencils and you'd be using a dozen pencils, whereas that you can just use a palette and just it feels like easier to get the color, you know, but also harder to actually do in terms of skill.
One of the things that I will point out on something like this, I took this from a photographic reference, but I changed the tree line completely. I mean, it kind of represents it, but it was different. So I had to design the trees around the church. The church was the focal point. I start with that, and then I work out how many trees I would put in and where I would put them, the lighter trees and the darker trees. All of that's got to be worked out before you start. In your head, I mean. You can't put it on paper, but you can in your head. And then once you put the church in, which I would have done before I put the trees in, then you fashion the trees to fit around the church. It's the composition side of that I love so much, the way that it works so well. And the great thing about an artist can do that. You know, if with a photographer, you're stuck with what you see. If you've got a dead tree in the middle, you've got a dead tree in the middle, you can't change it. But we can chop it down and change it.
Move it and add to it. And
yeah. But again, there's another favourite picture of mine. This was, I love doing trees and I love doing landscape work. And I've got another picture in my head at the moment, but I'm copying a picture that it's a master picture by Louise Rayner. We'll show that eventually, but that's one that I'm dying to get my teeth into. I can't remember there's any trees. I don't think there's any trees in that one. It's all buildings.
Yeah.
A lovely picture, but it's exciting stuff.
Yeah. So I'll put the links to both of those YouTube clips in the description if you're watching on YouTube or if you're watching on Facebook or listening to the show. I'll put these links so you can actually go to watch those clips. And obviously, if you want the full class, then if you want to watch those, then they are on our website. But I think it's so interesting watching you and hearing you talk about the trees, especially in the two different mediums, how the approaches are slightly differently and the advantages to both. So I hope that's been helpful. We might not be back next week. We might be having a little break next week. But I'm working on another class, so we'll potentially have another class out by the time we record the week after. But as always, if anyone has any questions or anything at all they want us to talk about, then you can always get in touch with us by email or drop a comment on this video, and we'll happily answer and talk about your question on the show. But for now, we will leave it there for this week. So thank you everyone for watching and for listening. I'm Stephen Bradley.
And I'm Colin Bradley.
Enjoy
Enjoy
your
your
week.
week.